this is um, going to be my favorite part of the afternoon. I really excited about the panel and for all you to hear from the panel. So it's going to be really simple. I'm going to allow them to go around and introduce themselves and their roles. And then I've got just two or three questions that hopefully will guide our conversation, and we'll stop to take questions. And I've asked them to share examples and stories. But these are kind of key participants who are both from La Casa and from CYFD and Doña Ana County, and they have graciously agreed to participate and share their experience with you of the last few months. So, I'm just gonna, like I said in the email earlier, just to have everybody. I'm gonna go around. We're just gonna do introductions first. So briefly, kind of introduce yourself as I kind of call on you, and just so people know kind of who you are, where you work, what the job you do, where you are. So we'll start with Tommi.
Good afternoon. My name is Tommi Fisher. I am a investigation supervisor with Child Protective Services in Doña Ana County.
Great, Tommi, thank you. And then we'll go over to Nubia. I'm just using how you guys are on my screen.
Hello, I'm Nubia Martinez. I am the Assistant Director of Support Services here at La Casa. So I work supervising the support services part.
Great, thanks, Nubia. And then Flor.
Hello, my name is Flor Gonzalez. I'm the Director of Support Services at La Casa, also in Doña Ana County.
All right, there we go. And Cristina.
Good afternoon. My name is Cristina Galarza. I'm an investigator with Child Protective Services.
Okay, thank you, Cristina. Lindsey.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lindsey Davis. I'm a professional development coach for CYFD Protective Services. So I provide coaching, training, workforce development support to the southwest part of the state, but also statewide practice initiatives.
That's great. And Bryana.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brianna Valdez. I am the Residential Services Director here at La Casa Inc., also in Southern New Mexico, Doña Ana County.
Great. So the way I'm going to do this is because I just set up in the last session that really we were looking, we started with each agency. We started with each set of professionals and said, here are the tools. We're going to coach you around that. We want you to apply them. So even though the bigger goal was increased collaboration, there was sort of an immediate sense of look at what this all means for you in your agency, right? And so the first question I have is, how did participation in this project help your agencies or yours, or your staff? So any of those things, how did it help or change the practice around related to domestic violence in children? And whoever wants to go first from whichever La Casa or CYFD, just unmute and I want to have an informal discussion here. So whoever unmutes first gets to go first.
I'll go first.
There you go, Nubia. You won the Jeopardy or whatever that is, where you have to hit the button. I think it'll be Nubia and then Cristina, and then we'll see who comes up after that. So go ahead.
So here with La Casa, since we started the Safe and Together model, what we did the changes as we were going through the trainings or the Kickstart. We provided releases of information to our clients as soon as they were coming in and identifying that they were working with Child Protective Services right there and then. So providing that assistance to be able to collaborate with them was the best thing that we could have done to help the clients to feel supported in advocacy portion with our case managers. So that is one of the things I have so many, but that's one of the things.
Yeah, and Nubia, was that a big change? I may ask some follow-up questions. Mm-hmm. Was that a big change from before?
It was. It really was, because we were taking into account our clients more than anything is their safety, that they feel that we can build and engage them for services. So having this taboo of CYFD coming into the picture where the kids might be taken from them, or, the stigmatism behind it that might happen. We wanted to make sure that they felt supported and that we're advocating for them. So most of the stuff, when they were coming in before, we're providing more the advocacy portion of let's educate you on domestic violence, let's educate you on the pattern. But now with us getting those releases of information, we're able to collaborate a little bit more on providing the strength for moms, or for our survivor victims in that point, to help them move forward, to find, to pass those barriers at that point, to connect them to those resources as well. So that is the difference that we've done. And that's what the release of information has been able to do, and get it from the get-go since the beginning as they're coming in for our services.
And it sounds like, we don't need to stay here long, but it sounds like just the fact that CYFD came to the table under the umbrella of this project, that shifted something for you to kind of move into that space with the release. It sounds like you felt less, need to be less kind of circle the wagons around the mom, right? So I think that's, if I'm hearing that.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, great, Nubia. We'll go over to Cristina, who is, about the same question, how this project changed your practice at CYFD.
I think it just overall brought us together to work on the same page instead of thinking that we're working against each other somehow. I mean, there's been times where, we have to go, unfortunately, look for families at La Casa, and we know that they're there, and we're told that there's no confirming or denying that they're in the shelter, and we have a child that safety is at risk. And I was one of those investigators that had a case, where the mother was notified that I was there to pick up her child with law enforcement, and at that time she's free to leave La Casa at any point and could have taken off with the child. So I think that this is really important and a really big benefit to both agencies, because I think working together and being on the same page, having the same idea, and seeing that it's not just CYFD doing what they want and La Casa doing what they want. It's everybody has similar training, and we have points of contact now, so we can work together with each other. Even though a lot of us work in the community sometimes, I mean, we still have to obey policy and procedure, but I think this is something that with both agencies working together is going to be working a lot of wonders together for the survivors.
So you feel one, as you mentioned, just increased points of contact, and I know that's been talked about in some of our meetings, that there's people have more kind of awareness of who's there, who to talk to, who to call, who to talk to. Is that right, Cristina? Is that sort of what you're referring to?
Absolutely. And I think that's really good, because I think the last things that the survivors have to do on their own to figure out stuff, and if we have points of contact to hand them off easier, it's just one less thing for them to have to worry about at that moment. So I feel that connection is really important.
Okay, great. Who wants to go next with an observation? I think somebody else was getting ready before, to either how, people are talking about both about how their agency changed, or the next question is really about the collaboration. So whichever thing you want to talk about, who wants to share next?
I think for our agency in general, I mean, we've just become better. Sorry. I think we've just been better informed about domestic violence the last couple of years. I mean, I remember taking SAFED together prior to the pandemic, and really we kind of lost how to implement that within the department. And so us being part of this model is kind of refocusing it and kind of retraining us to implement the model together. And it's been great, because I think we were really lacking in our understanding and kind of always putting all those things onto the parent, onto the mom, onto the victim. And we were really holding, perpetrators accountable. We weren't really looking in the lens. And so I think it's definitely a lot of change. And even staffing up with like our legal team, I even have an attorney saying, well, how is that keeping mom and the kids safe and together? So, I mean, it's really good to have those kind of questions and see, that language being used throughout our department.
And I just want to say to everybody else that, Tommi's comment about sort of training before the pandemic obviously threw lots of things out of whack, but that CYFD was really trying to find a handle on sort of how to restart the efforts. And this was one of the best things we'd come up with, which was really to do it in the context of this collaboration Kickstarter pilot with La Casa. So it was I think, Tommi, that's an interesting bit of context and history for people, that it was really about reinforced learning that already started on the CYFD side. So I think, Flor, you were going to go next.
Yeah, I think one of the important things to really look at when we were working with this model was just the true partnership and connection that was, I think, just reestablished from the get-go. Even before our first session, we saw an increase of calls and networking that started to happen between La Casa and protective services. And that was really neat to see, because there were barriers on both ends, both our end and their end, that we were both trying to overcome. But as soon as we were working with this model, we started coming to meetings and collaborating, it felt like those barriers or those walls started to come down. And there was a true sense and understanding of each of our roles, and that we are all here for the same reason, which is, to protect our kids.
Thanks, Lauren. I just want to, before we go, I think, Lindsey, you were going to go next, but I think that just to say to people, there was a very conscious decision in the design of this project that while we knew that there were hot button issues like confidentiality, right, or the I can't confirm or deny, conversation, which many of us have experienced in lots of different ways over the years, that that we wanted to do that sort of systemic pivot to the perpetrator, giving the tools, giving the framework, because we believe that if you get people together trying to hash out these kind of issues of confidentiality or tensions, that you actually can, again, reinforce old patterns. And we want to give people a new kind of way to relate to each other, new pathways to relate. And so when I hear this, I hear the success of those other pathways. You don't have to focus on the historic conflict. You can actually create new pathways for connection. So, Lindsey, would you like to go next? I think you were trying to unmute earlier.
Sure, I shared the same observations and insights as panelists. I think the one thing I'll add is what I loved about this project is that it gave focus. Tommi mentioned that this has really been an approach that we've been embracing for several years. The pandemic, put strains on a lot of our plans, but it focusing in a specific service area, a specific county office, our provider, community provider, gave us the focus that we needed to really practice and get in depth. So I think I really appreciate that. I think there's a lot of learning in that.
Right. And Lindsey, you have direct experience of where kind of things kind of got shuffled around earlier and didn't quite we all struggle with trying to find the way to move forward. So again, I really want to emphasize this was a great way to move safely together forward in New Mexico, and it had the effect on both sides. Bryana, is there, I don't know if you want to kind of contribute to this at this point.
Yeah, so, I want to say I agree with the sentiments that have been shared. I think the issue that we were facing before, because we had our ROIs, we've had, these policies surrounding confidentiality. And I think the feeling before was that we just don't want to give up the information, we're being difficult, and this project has helped us to better understand why, giving the context as to why we do these things has opened up that communication and helped us to center survivors and their children. Something that we had done prior, we had been working on was speaking with, whenever we had to make a CPS report, making sure to always involve mom or parent before we make the report so they can self-report, and finding the ways to have those conversations more delicately and working with the actual, boots on the ground, the people that are doing these very difficult jobs has been really helpful. It's been great to see the perspective from all of, our agencies and the people that work there. So
great.
That's been great to see.
Great. Thanks, Bryana. I'm open up another round, so the question about kind of, and people can answer whatever they want, but, does anybody want to speak to specific tools they used and how they worked? And I know, Nubia, you have a whole list of changes you want to talk about, so you can jump in there. So I'm just kind of adding the specific tools to the possible topics, but just whoever wants to go next and share about changes in collaboration or changes in practice, that, just go for it. Yeah, Cristina.
I'll have to say, understanding my parents' strength, that tool is really good. I'm an investigator, so I'm out when the report starts, gets started to initiate. So I think also after your assessment and looking over everything is also looking at what's working well for the family and not so much just the negative. I think looking at, how the survivor, on the parent's strength, like, how she maintains how they maintain their stability and stuff like that, or what's working well for the family at this point is really important to help shift your thinking a little bit. I think everyone just focuses on the bad instead of looking at what is working well. So I think that was something really important. And the documenting, how important it was to like document the behaviors instead of just the incident, like it was an incident that just happened. So I think that's a really big shift in like investigations, because our documentation is important for all that stuff to be able to do proper assessments.
So thanks, Cristina. So does anybody else, going off that, both you spoke about two things, but if we look at the that survivor strength handout, I know that had effects in both agencies, and just so people hear it, it's really about asking the survivor, working with her to identify what she's doing to promote the children's. And again, if you remember, if you watch those principles in one of the slides from earlier, what is she doing to promote the child's safety, emotional, physical safety? What are they doing to promote healing from trauma? What are they doing to promote the kids' stability and nurturing? There's just a range of questions that they're being asked to kind of engage with. So does anybody else want to talk about that tool and its impact? Yeah, Flor.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off of what Cristina just said, because we saw a great opportunity to use this tool with our CYP case managers. When our survivors are walking in, there tends to be a focus on discussing the trauma, give us your history, what happened. And in order for us to be able to make them feel, safe and validated, we started using this tool, so that we're talking about the positive things as well. We're talking about the strengths. We're talking about, you've talked about all this stuff that's happened to you, but look at all the great things that you've done and look at what you continue to do. And, that has been an important shift for us, because, we never took a step back to see, we're asking all these questions, but we're never talking about the strengths. We're never talking about all the positive things that, the survivor is doing. And then comes with that comes the shared language. So now when we are collaborating with protective services, then we're sharing that language, and we're able to, talk about the strengths and support and have these conversations that are really important.
So just for everybody's information, you're talking about your child and youth program worker, right? That's what the CYP stands for. You use that. I know what it means, or at least, I may have gotten it slightly wrong, but, and so what I'm hearing you say, Flor, is this interjected a whole other element into that intake process that you didn't have before. And it sounds like it changed, and maybe you can comment on this more. It changed the experience of the survivor, changed the interaction between the worker and the survivor. Can you kind of drill down a little bit more on that? How that changed that intake process, or that initial assessment process?
Well, it's another step. So they have the intake, but it's a different step. So when another
Okay.
person steps in, which is the CYP case manager, the children and youth case manager, instead of looking at it like, oh, I have another intake, oh, here I go again to talk about all this trauma, then now we're focusing on these positive behaviors. So it did make a huge difference.
A huge difference in their relationship with the CYP worker. So that's great. And then the second part you said was that it then gave you a common language that's focused on strengths. So you weren't battling on what mom should do necessarily, or what she didn't do, or failure to protect you. Now you're able to come together at this different point and with PS Protective Services, and talk about what you both know about what she was doing right, what she was actively doing to protect the kids. Did I get that, Flor? Did I get that right in that way? Okay. So who wants to go next about that tool or other tools, that just the difference it made in collaboration or in practice? Yeah, Nubia.
I can go.
You're like, I've got so much to say.
I know I do. I
No,
really
no,
do.
don't worry about it. We still have another bunch of time to fill up, so gonna keep going.
I know. So some of the tools that we use, just going with what Flor said, had been going the strength and giving that empowerment to the survivor victim in that sense, and providing her with and I keep saying her because I have this scenario of one case that we went through as Flor was talking. And it's just changing our language a little bit. It has helped so much. Just being able to have our CYP, our children and youth case manager, call the CYFD worker, an investigator. And as her presence being known, as she's speaking up, is talking about not classifying it as an invisible perpetrator anymore. It's not necessarily somebody that's not there. It's not the wording that was used previously was mostly the violence that, mom and dad had, domestic violence that mom and both parents, contribute together. And that created, the invisible perpetrator. And it did not put the blame on the individual, the abuser, the perpetrator at that time. So having those meetings that we did, those collaborations, and learning to use that shared language that way has helped so much, not only empower our victims. I saw even our case managers feel empowered themselves as they're being able to collaborate with the CYFD investigators at that point. We had a case of a mom of 6 kids and in a relationship for 11 years. Here comes in, does her intake, provides everything. One of her children draws a drawing with one of our case managers for CYP. And it's a little bit raising red flags, concerning. And of course, this is where CYFD comes into the picture. We're mandated reporters. We did, like Bryana mentioned, La Casa does necessarily bring the mom into the picture as well. We want to make sure that we are providing that assistance, letting her know we are mandated reporters. Mm-hmm. This is what's going to happen. Those releases come into play. And when all this comes into play and we talk, not only is CYFD coming into the picture now because it was related of, these are concerning. And mom, you can see that she ended up, to make the story short, she ended up living, she was in a shelter. From there, she got Section 8 voucher for housing. Also was working in cleaning homes at that time. And I know that there was an incident that happened when she was for spring break. Didn't have a daycare or anything. Maybe she didn't know where to go at that time, or Boys and Girls Club. So all these ideas that brought after the fact, when our case manager spoke to the investigator, letting her know, hey, one of the children disclosed to me that, mom is cleaning houses, but they're in the car at the moment. And we're talking about 5 kids from the ages ranging from 1 to teen, right? So we do have the teen that is able to take care of the kids, or able to go to the house and, use the restroom, go ahead and eat, and all this different stuff. So when they're collaborating together, they defined what mom's strengths are, and what they can do to go ahead and accomplish those barriers regarding those. So they've used the shared language, they've used the collaboration as well, using mom's strengths, and the case manager was able to face forward first, talking to the case managers from CYFD as well, providing all this information to them so they can work collaboratively together. So.
That's great. And I know you've talked about this case before, and they came up with creative solutions, and they addressed the kids' needs, and they worked together really well around that. And so it was a great example that I know you've shared earlier. So again, thank you, Nubia. So other people, do you want to comment on the tools, about the common language, or anything else that you think is important to share with this audience about what changed, what made a difference? What surprised you in hopefully in a good way about sort of the changes that happened, again, so whoever wants to go next.
So I've noticed that improved communication amongst the agencies. So one of our case managers and the CYP worker, they're in consistent communication with the CYFD worker on one of our clients' cases. And that's been really great to see because they're always updating each other. It helps us to avoid any type of triangulation or any issues with, providing confusing information to clients. So that's been really great to see that improved communication and that consistent communication amongst the agencies.
That's great. That's great to see, again, so that kind of consistent kind of connection and communication. Other things, who wants to go next, about sharing about their experience?
I'm happy to highlight one of the other tools that I really love. I feel like it doesn't get as much love as the perpetrator mapping tool or the understanding my parents' strengths, the ones we love. But the domestic violence informed continuum of practice is an amazing self-assessment, team assessment process. You can do it, as a group. You can do it as an individual. And one of the reasons I love it is because you can be at different levels of proficiency or competency based on the practice, right? So like we find, because we've been doing this for a couple of years, especially amongst investigations, our, perpetrators pattern, right? Our assessment skills are really, really becoming refined. But then we look across, so maybe that's an area of proficiency, but then we think about, man, we see documentation and it's still using some of that mutual language to describe the violence, right? And so I love that you can use that continuum to pinpoint areas where, you feel like your team or you're really excelling, and then where are opportunities that we can come together and problem solve.
Right. Thanks, Lindsey. Lindsey's referencing, if people remember earlier, I didn't share that on the list. It was brought in by trainers. It was part of the training package. And what it does is basically help people understand that, like this trauma-informed continuum of practice or cultural competency continuum of practice, that you can have at one end DV destructive, domestic violence destructive practice, where you're pushing survivors away from help, or you're putting them in greater danger, actually. That's domestic violence destructive. All the way over, and Lindsey is using the terms, domestic violence competent or proficient practice. And it gives examples and lets you locate yourself, and it gives you definitions and lets you really think about where are you on this continuum, and how do you move from domestic violence destructive or neglectful up to pre-competent or competent or proficient, and kind of goes through examples. And so it is a great diagnostic, self-diagnostic, practice diagnostic, systems diagnostic tool. So thanks, Lindsey, for raising that up. Any other comments about any of the specific tools, or any of the specific, sharing any other stories that people have about the impact this had on you, on your staff, on a particular work with a particular family?
I think in general, because I provide supervision, so I'm not necessarily in direct contact with clients all the time.
Right.
But I think with me, it's just definitely pushed me to, when I supervise my investigators, even if they're not as proficient and safe and together, they weren't part of the collaboration, but they've had the training, I kind of like direct them, okay, like this, let's look at this in this way, let's look at that in that way. And so I'm definitely pushing them to look at it in a different eye set, try to use the tools. I know a lot of the times they get a little bit nervous about using something that they're not familiar with or haven't used. And luckily I have, a couple team members that are part, took the model in, they really took it to heart, and they're kind of like our champions as well.
Right.
And so then they help push their other teammates to look at it. And so it's kind of nice to hear around the office when we're staffing cases, did we look at it in this way? Have we used this tool? Have we done this? you know, so I think it's definitely helped our investigators at that level because, you know, we only work with families in such a snapshot. So we have very limited time to work with families, and it kind of gives us a more focused approach.
Great. And Tommi, you know, there's something you're raising up that I didn't mention in the last session about the design, and that you're raising up that I want to speak to, and then see if any of you want to comment more and build on what Tommi said. We very consciously designed based on network theory and social change around that we weren't going to look to train everybody in both agencies. We actually looked for trying to get about 25% of the staff from each of the offices, you know, from La Casa and from PS, from CYFD PS, and get them involved. So there's about 10 people on La Casa side, correct? Do I have that about right, roughly? And about 20 people on the PS side. So I want people to hear that was really consciously shooting for more intensive work. I said it's light touch, but more intensive work with a smaller group of people to really get them really connected and supported and coached around the model. Because there would be coaching sessions, you know, every couple of weeks with my team, with our faculty, kind of working with them. And so, Tommi, when you're talking, you know, and you're really kind of pointing out what you see from the supervisor's level is we created these people with greater confidence and skill in the model, and their learning and their confidence and skill impacted some of their peers. So you're seeing a wider impact than the direct participants in the project. So I'm wondering, Lindsey, you're shaking your head too. If somebody on the CYFD side wants to expand on it all, Tommi or Cristina or Lindsey, if you want to expand on sort of that spiraling or that kind of what you've seen about the kind of wider effect beyond the direct participants.
I've already spoken, so I wanted to give Cristina an opportunity. So I'm talking too much.
No, you're not. Go ahead.
Okay. I think, well, we have representatives here from our investigations unit, but also participating in the pilot are workers who work at different service areas within Child Protective Services. And so some of that ripple effect I've really noticed has been in those other service areas. I think our investigators in a lot of ways are kind of early adopters of this practice. And because of that really thorough assessment that they do in the early stages of a family's involvement with our system, you know, that's where that perpetrator mapping tool, right, all of that comes into play. But, you know, you have to think differently about, well, what does it look like for us to really keep a child safe and together with the survivor parent when now the child's been in custody for 3 years. Right. So applying that. So I've really seen that expanded in that adaptability in our other service areas, especially when we have legal cases, child's already in custody. So I'm thinking, you know, our workforce who's really focused on permanency and reunification.
Right. And we encouraged you, I mean, just to say this, to pick people from different teams, but not just pick one person from that team, but pick at least two. So you often had two people from that, you know, more than one person from investigations, more than one person from permanency, so they could support each other. And so I think that was part of the design as well. Cristina, you don't need to. I don't know if you want to add something or not, you know, if you're good.
I'm good.
Okay, you're good. So anybody on La Casa side want to comment on sort of any observable impact of focusing on one set of people, how that might have rippled out throughout the agency?
Yes, so one of the individuals that's also, that was a part of this pilot project is a shift supervisor for the residential team. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of influence with the RAs, the other residential advocates, RAs. And I've just seen a change even in her and how she's employing like conversation in service assessments and speaking to a survivor who's in crisis and approaching, you know, policies that might involve their children, you know, just seeing that and that ripple effect on the entire team. It's being modeled. And I think that's been really great to see how it's being modeled by the individuals that are participating in this. Because I'm also not direct service of a supervisor. So No,
that's great, Bryana. That's a great example of how that supervisor modeling and and teaching through her supervision and through the work she's doing. Anybody else on the Casa side want to share, just an observation about the ripple effect or the spiraling out?
I think there's a genuine interest in what we're doing. And so you have, 10 people from La Casa that are attending these meetings. We're talking about it, we're meeting about it. Somebody's passing by the office and they're wanting to stop by and say, okay, so what is this? Tell me more about it. It's like, okay, come in, have a seat. Let's have a conversation about, this tool that we just learned about. And they're wanting more and they're wanting more. And things start clicking after a while, because then we start talking about, okay, do you remember that tool we talked about last week? Well, now we're going to implement it, and this is how we're going to implement it. And there's just a lot of interest, and it's just because everybody's talking about it.
That's great. Nubia, do you want to add anything, or you want to kind of add to what Bryana and Flo said?
No, I mean it's the same thing. I think our documentation with our 13 domains and service assessment, the language being applied there as well. So it's just I see that it's a ripple effect when they're like, no, you don't label that anymore this way. Remember the Safe and Together model. This is the way you do it. So that's what I constantly hear before they submit the documentation to me now.
Oh, that's great. They're coaching one another and saying, no, Nubia is not going to want to see it that way. You got to do it this other way. That's great. So I think that's wonderful. So I'm aware, that just such great sharings from everybody. Thank you. I'm thinking about opening it up for questions if you're all okay with that at this point. There may be one last question about takeaways, but, are you okay with that? Me kind of opening up and see what questions people have? All right. So, raise your hand if you've got a question for the panel. This is a chance to kind of dive a little deeper into this, into their experiences, and again, see how it connects up to your what you're thinking. So, or you can drop something in the chat box and I can read it to them. So, take a moment, reflect on what you're hearing about increased collaboration, shared language, shared focus on strength, making the perpetrator visible, this ripple effect. Kind of restarting an effort in, these are some of the themes that I've been hearing, restarting PS.
Oh, I think he froze like mid-sentence.
Well, we can keep the conversation going. So if there are questions, please raise your hand, put a question in the chat. As you're doing that, one of the things that I would want to say about involving Safe and Together in this conference is it's such a perfect combination with what we're going to be going over tomorrow with the coordinated community response, and that this is really taking the coordinated community response to the next level. That most of what Scott Miller will be talking about tomorrow is about the coordinated community response in the criminal legal system. And this is taking it into the child welfare system. And that is such an important step. And there's so much work to be done. And the work that you guys are doing, I really think is blazing the trail to be able to talk about that, to be able to talk about your collaboration, your partnership on a national conference is nothing short of just invigorating and exciting. So on behalf of all of us, thank you for your willingness to share that. And I wonder if there are, if you had, the 15-second elevator conversation with one of your peers in child welfare, and they were saying, I'm just not sure about this new thing, what would you say to them about why this is a better way to go?
And we do also have a couple of questions in the chat as well.
Wonderful.
All right. Is it okay if I read off the question that's all right? So it looks like we have an attendee ask for La Casa. I know your BIP supervisor was involved in this project. Has the project changed the BIP program in regards to CYFD involved parents?
So yes, it has. Our BIP supervisor was involved in the trainings, and from it, we're able to look at the tools that were provided and gathering some of that information to be able to, work with our participants on a regular basis. So it has changed it. I think it's changed the conversations as well and the focus. And not necessarily the focus, I guess it just puts more responsibility on the participants and really asking them to really look at the behaviors and their behavior towards children and how they're hurting their children. And that was a really important takeaway from this project.
Thank you, Terry, for jumping in. My computer crashed, and happens once a month sometimes now. I got to figure out what to do about it. Was there more? You're just reading a question from a participant. Are there more?
Yes, we have one more if that's okay.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Could the child welfare folks talk about how you've handled workers feeling like implementation of the model takes more time that they don't have due to the case volume, etc.?
I think that's a fun question always, because with every new, thing that we always initiative, we always say, oh, we don't have time, or we don't, it's so busy, or it changes. But I think the good thing about it is like the tools are actually very easy to follow. They're easy to do. It doesn't take a lot of time or work. And when we're looking at like these specific cases, I mean, they're very time consuming. And so I think we have to look at, okay, this is going to make our kind of our job a little easier, because it really does, put things into boxes for us and kind of gives us a pathway to really say, okay, like, is this something that we can implement services for the children and the safety to keep them with their mom, or is this something that we're actually going to have to look forward at, having to remove, because yeah, we have such a limited time frame, but I think it helps us make those decisions. And so I don't necessarily think it adds a whole lot to our caseload or having that, I don't think I've had it been brought up a whole lot with me and my workers. And even on the PPW side, like on the permanency workers, when they're working these cases of reunification where the domestic violence is involved, I mean, again, it gives them a treatment plan. These are steps and these are behavioral changes that we need to see from parents in order to have their children reunified with them. So, I mean, it's just a tool to help us out. And I don't think I've seen a lot of or heard a lot of gripes. And I don't know if Cristina wants to check in, because she's like one of our high caseload investigators always.
Sure, I'll talk about it. I have to say that I think it's most definitely worth the time to take a step back. We do have a high caseload. We don't have a lot of time, and we do have very strict timeframes to meet. But I think, like, for myself, since I took Safe and Together right before COVID hit, I carry the questions with me. So I do, when I have a DV case, I already know because I already read the report. I have my questions with me all the time in the field, and I'll just peek at them so I can do a better assessment. And I think it's worth taking that time, because you get more information also. And I think something that really stuck with me also in the core Safe and Together was asking the question multiple times, because sometimes they don't really trust you and they really don't talk to you. And I think taking that time to repeat over and over, sometimes to ask the question. And as you're building rapport, you gain more information and you're able to do a thorough assessment as far as what the family is really needing. So I think it's most definitely worth the time to take a few steps back and do a thorough investigation and ask more questions, because this is a family you're dealing with. It's not just an individual, it's a whole family. And so I think this has been a really big benefit to be able to learn different points of view and learn how to do a thorough assessment. As far as working with the perpetrator, I mean, from my history, I've worked with offenders in the past. So I think with me, I enjoy talking to them and asking them about their actions, about their behaviors. I can have that conversation. I'm not afraid to ask the question. So I think that's just something to learn.
Right. Thanks, Cristina. Terry, thanks for jumping in. Are there other questions from before, or should I just pick it up from here?
Nope. Those are all the questions that we've had, and Pat does have her hand up.
Yeah, I got that. Thank you. Thank you so much for stepping in. I knew I was in good hands. Pat, over to you with your question for the panel. Oh. Did I lose Pat? Pat, are you here? You're on mute.
Sorry. I wanted to go back on the comment of faithfully adopt the model, but I want to give kudos to Cristina and Tommi Fisher, you know, even before the model was adopted and we were going to these trainings. I'll give you an example on Cristina when we talk about commitment. While she was working at the district attorneys and then with probation, she made it a point on her own to come and call and say, hey, Pat, I want to go and attend orientations for BIB. I want to be able to see how you go about working with offenders. And I think that's the type of character and commitment that we want to see. Regardless of what your position is going in there and working as collaboratives. And the answer at La Casa when I worked there was absolutely, véngase, come on, you know, come and see that, and her engagement. So I think now having the model and having this collaborative, I am so happy for the community because it's only going to be much better work. So thank you, ladies, for your commitment. And I know being a CPS worker, it's hard, but kudos to you guys.
That's great. Thanks, Pat, for the shout out to them. And I do want to underline, you know, Cristina, what you're saying is, you know, I think that we have to look across the board about the skills and confidence level and training and support for workers, you know, who might not be as comfortable as you are, right? And how do we get those up to speed, right? So they can be doing the same things you're doing. So thank you for that work as well. Anybody else just want to ask a question before we kind of move to wrapping up? Something that you're sitting there that you want to ask that we haven't got to? This is probably the last question, you know, unless there's a lot of interest in whoever unmuted, I try again because I can't hear you.
That was Paul. Paul, are you still asking a question? Go ahead, David.
Yeah, if you're trying and you're having trouble with your mic, you know, you want to write a question in the chat box, please do that. But again, still space for one more question. We got you've got a great workshop after this with Johnny Trujillo, so you know I want to make sure that you get out of here and you get in there next. Any other last questions before I kind of go back to the panel for a final last word? All right. So just, you know, that not everybody needs to answer this, but you know, but just hear from a few of you. If you were gonna give advice to other counties in New Mexico or other jurisdictions around the country, you know, about implementing this kind of collaboration, what should they know? Like, what should they be prepared for? What should they you know do to you know kind of think about this? What's, you know, sort of your advice from your experience with this?
Be ready to have some good conversations.
Okay. And you mean that seriously, not tongue in cheek. You mean that really, yeah.
I mean, you're gonna have to really sit there at the table and talk about these, because I know that there is like that difficulty sometimes to just be the first one to reach out, or this, you know, have those conversations, say, hey, we're not working well together right now, so what can we do to improve this collaboration? And I think you just kind of have to have that finally just break away and really just dive in. And I think we talked about this on a supervisor level, like how do we help other counties implement this, and how do we, you know, how are we going to be there for them when they decide to have that conversation? And you know, can we be coaches to those other counties from a CPS standpoint, to those counties that are having those difficulties or want to improve their collaboration with their domestic violence shelters?
That's great, Tommi. You know, I you know, for me, you know, the first part of what you said, I translate into having the courage, the curiosity, the openness, you know, to have the difficult or maybe slightly awkward or whatever that was conversations at the beginning. But to me, when I hear you say, you've talked about how do we coach other counties, that's to me an example of sort of the value you feel that this has brought to PS and Doña Ana County, because otherwise I don't imagine you'd be taking your precious time to be thinking about how can we coach our peers. So just I want to translate that into a sense of a value and kind of commitment to, oh, this could be useful for them too, and I want to help them get there. So that's great. Any other kind of advice or sort of for anybody considering doing something like this that you want to share?
I think initially, when we were told that we were going to participate in this pilot project, we were given a schedule, and it gave us a list of dates. And at first, you know, when we saw that, we were looking at this going, oh my gosh, what is this all about? Are we cramming all of this in this time? And there was a sense of a little bit of panic. You know, how are we going to do this? As we started the project and we started collaborating and we started meeting, we were looking forward to our joint sessions. You know, when is our next joint session? Because we really want to talk about this with PS, you know, and then it became a thing of, you know what, we don't have to wait till the next meeting. We can just pick up the phone. We could have these conversations. And so it's just, you know, looking at the schedule might seem a little intimidating at first, but you really get to the point where you look forward to the learning aspect of this pilot program, and then the collaboration, it's just great. So I would really encourage, you know, providers to really look into this project.
That's great. Thank you. Anybody else in the panel? I think we're almost done, but anybody else in the panel have something burning they want to share about that and answer to that question?
I can share really briefly. One of the things that we love about this model is how behavioral it is. And so I think in thinking about how other counties or other agencies can implement this, you also have to be really focused on the behaviors of the workforce and the agency itself. So in implementing something like this, really getting clear, like what are the things that we're going to do differently? What are the things that we're going to do more effectively? What does it look like in terms of each person's job description, right? Because we don't all do the same thing. Because then you can start really looking at what are those markers of success. You know, do our safety plans or our treatment plans look different? Do our assessments have certain information? Because then you know what to look for. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thing that staff would really like to support is when, after establishing this common language, when they make sense of things in their actual role and for their job, then they're more likely to adopt it, right? And so getting really clear about what that looks like and what are those key deliverables that everyone's responsible for, and how is that supposed to interact with the model, as well as we all have a bunch of tools in our toolbox, and this model is one of those. And so how does this model talk to and interact with the other types of tools that we implement as part of our job? That's been a key focus for us.
That's great, Lindsey. And you're making me think, just as a reminder to everybody here, that we have different levels on each agency side here, but we had another level of involvement higher up, and and just really understand that there was support from the highest levels of both agencies and participation from the highest level of both agencies. So not only is it about the excitement and the energy and about the, thinking about the behaviors, like Lindsey's talking about the staff and policies, but there was really, the regional manager was there in the leadership meetings on the PS side, supporting this, giving the message, just various levels of leadership participated, and it really, I think, also helped contribute to the success of this. So I just want to thank the panel for their participation in the project and also their participation today. You can see the journey. Flor talks about, we were leery of the time and how we're going to do this, and then the excitement, and then here she is volunteering time to be on a panel to share and talk about it, and so the transition is there and the energy there, and so I really want to acknowledge all of you for your kind of jumping in with both feet, trying it, working it, and seeing what the results are, and that it works for you in your roles, and it improves the collaboration. So I just want to thank you. I want to thank the New Mexico Coalition for pulling this event together, giving us a chance to talk about this.